open science is not just about the access, but it's also about building a transparent and collaborative process for doing science itself. ORKG is more like an ecosystem for research articles or research artifacts. It's the perfect combination or a dream combination for a researcher like me who comes from a different background and to try and understand knowledge infrastructure and then help solve the problem of how we can manage knowledge through semantic web.
Multiple people from multiple different angles come together and say, okay, this is the dream. And Vinod, thanks a lot for being here today. You are the 8th person I have here on stage. Thanks a lot for being here, and please introduce yourself to the viewer.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me in this series of video. So my name is Vinod Ilangovan, and I work as the coordinator for the curation of the Open Research Knowledge Graph within the curation and community building team in the ORKG. Most of my job involves taking people into a tour of the ORKG to make it easier for the complex user interface to be introduced to them so that they can interact with the ORKG and then they can curate the scientific content into the ORKG.
So basically, you are the assistant, the aide. So when I get into the ORKG and I struggle, you are the person I can come to and say, hey, Vinod, I'm struggling. Please help. Explain me this.
One could say that,
Okay.
although I'm not quite confident in answering all the questions that people might have. So I'll have to redirect it to the right people. I just try to help people with what they can see in that interface.
Okay. And your background is, what drives you? What is your science?
Yeah, so my background is I'm trained as a biologist. So I did my integrated master's, which was in biomedical sciences. And then I did a PhD in the field of biology or the circadian biology, where I tried to look into how the body clock functions and how proteins make that clock tick in our body. And then I did a postdoctoral study on life history threads of organisms. And while doing all of this, I was also heavily using gene ontology because biologists use gene ontologies quite a lot. And that brought me into the ORKG where we use ontologies. But also, while I was a PhD candidate, I was also interested in joining the open science movement, primarily for my own personal reasons, because I was trained in India as a master's student where I did not have enough access to research materials or research articles. And when I moved to Germany, I had enough options to access the materials. But then that problem didn't stop because then friends back home would still ask me for research articles. And then I thought this seems to be a systemic problem. So it needs to be tackled some way. And so open access was the one that brought me into the open science movement. But then I realized that open science is not just about the access, but it's also about building a transparent and collaborative process for doing science itself. And across all the research life cycle stages, one can practice open science. And that is that kind of realization that you can make science open, or science should be open by default, and then closed science should only be an anecdote, drove me to deal with things like this.
That is so many interesting things to leap off right away. For example, we had a conversation with Marcus 2 interviews ago, where we introduced that our team is so multidisciplinary. Like we have so many different angles all coming together at open science or at knowledge infrastructures, because you mentioned you came from biology, but eventually you ended up at ontologies and at how is knowledge structured. So I guess in a way, the ORKG is where all of this comes together: knowledge infrastructures, ontologies, open science, community collaboration, and
Exactly. It's the perfect combination or a dream combination for a researcher like me who comes from a different background and to try and understand knowledge infrastructure and then help solve the problem of how we can manage knowledge through semantic web.
and to me that's so fascinating because you have, in a way, a totally different background than me, and we both arrive at the ORKG and say this is the dream. So, and given the people I've talked to, I think this is a common feeling. Like multiple people from multiple different angles come together and say, okay, this is the dream. And I've mentioned this comparison a lot. I think this is something like the Wikipedia moment, where we are starting something grander. So what makes the ORKG special that it is such a valuable resource for the open science community?
Well, the ORKG is very special in the sense that it allows visualization of complex knowledge because it's a graph database. Science by itself is complex, but when you have to visualize different things within each of those domains, that becomes very difficult. But with a graph database, one can actually visualize what encompasses what and then how these are interconnected. And I think that is something that is very, very powerful with the ORKG because any other platform, there are multiple platforms that also use graph technologies to provide context to a particular subfield or a particular field. But the ORKG is very field agnostic, that it can actually take knowledge that's the entire scholarly knowledge that's produced so far, and also the entire scholarly knowledge that will be produced in the future. So these can come together in a very interesting ways. And I think that is what makes the ORKG very attractive for the open science community. And in particular, it is a database where you can actually document knowledge because as any researcher, you could enter a research article or any research artifact into the ORKG in a very structured way. So not only just documentation, but you could also look into the interconnectedness of these knowledge entities. And all of this happens in a very transparent and reusable way. Which is, again, coming back into the open access part of it. And it also aids collaboration between different researchers. So I could demonstrate this with one of the examples. One of the popular known comparisons that we have is the COVID-19 comparison. So one could compare different things about pandemic that was ongoing as a property, things like the dates of this study is done and at what location it is done, and all of these are used in the existing comparison. But as a researcher, if I'm interested in whether they have done ethical reviews for multiple articles or multiple studies, then I can actually come and add what is the ethical standards for these particular research that is published on COVID-19. And I can start adding that knowledge graph into the existing knowledge graph, which is to interconnect what is already present. I think that is one of the powerful things that the ORKG acts as an aggregator platform like.
And it is basically one big collaboration from all the different access points. And you mentioned there's not this barrier of a discipline. So basically, when I come from engineering, like I often heard, yeah, but this is a sociological problem and you cannot work on this further alone. So I basically can do the groundwork. And when a sociological researcher comes to it, he just says, oh, easy. 90% of my job is already done. I only have to select all of them, do my own little research, and add the little 10%. And I guess this is where something Annalena mentioned in the very first video. Nobody has to know the whole picture. Nobody can attempt to understand the whole scientific knowledge right now. So everybody can just do whatever they can in their little spot and work on that, while the other ones work on the neighbored one, and the other one works on the neighbored one, and then you have the giant network of the entire knowledge covered just by everybody doing a small part. And I guess that is the spirit of open science and collaboration again.
Exactly. Not everyone needs to know everything, and one can't actually try to understand the whole, the elephant in the room, let's say. When we try to do our own part, it's easier to get lost into the details, and then we try to miss the whole or the bigger picture. And I think platforms like ORKG can actually help fill in those knowledge gaps where we can try and understand where our focus needs to be further. This is enabled because the infrastructure allows that. Because currently the scholarly infrastructure is suffering from that all the knowledge is locked into the documents because we focus more on the document format rather than how the knowledge would flow. And because of this, we are just focused on what do we publish in this particular article and then what is inside that. And that would be like a very tiny protein that is affecting something. And we wouldn't find a cure for cancer. And how would we find a cure for cancer? Then maybe multiple of these articles need to interact together. And that is what ORKG is enabling.
When we were talking with Oliver, we compared the ORKG to a garden. But I guess coming from a direct body biology perspective, we could as well call it an organism, and having individual papers, just like framed cells, and hanging them on the wall. Like, this is part of a body. No, it is framed. It can't do anything. It is locked inside there. You can't do anything with it. And then the ORKG basically takes it out of the frame, puts it into an organism, and then it can actually emerge and become a fully functioning organism.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. But I would also like to point out that we could also use the analogy of the ecosystem itself. Each individual article is like one organism sitting there as a locked entity, and then ecosystem needs to interact with each other in order to flourish and then be alive. So I think ORKG is more like an ecosystem for research articles or research artifacts to be in a structured way of documenting.
We have started to create memes, and coming out of those interviews, I guess I have the best ammunition for more and more. So basically, I can now create an image of a very sad ice bear in a zoo and write PDF below that, and then do the whole Arctic landscape and say ORKG.
Yeah, that would perfectly fit.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We have mentioned that the ORKG is an entire ecosystem. And in a way, I guess open science is acknowledging the world as a large ecosystem and not just your little zoo. So, what would you wish if you could change one or two factors in the world? If you want, you can have a third, because it's customary to have 3 wishes. So feel free to formulate 2 or 3 wishes for the open science community. You can change something today. What would it be?
Yeah, thanks for being a generous genie, Tim. Yeah, if I could have 2 or 3 wishes, I think the first thing that I would try to change is the way how we document knowledge. As I already mentioned, ORKG is a knowledge documenting platform which allows structured documented knowledge to be collaborative, and there's also interconnected within the knowledge. So I think we would need to change incentive structures. So if you look into the pillars of open science, I think it is fair data, research integrity, and next generation metrics and rewards and incentives, and also citizen science or science communication. Also a few other elements that forms the pillars of open science. But if we actually take the rewards and incentives and the part where the metrics are involved, because currently metrics are the ones that are proxy for how good the quality of science is, or how good the quality of that particular research or that particular journal or the particular issue is doing. And we often use wrong metrics in order to promote our own science. And I think that needs to stop. And if we want to use responsible next generation metrics, that should actually come from structured documented knowledge rather than the metadata of what that documented knowledge is doing. Because currently that is what the current practice is. And if we try to change that, I think ORKG would be the platform where that data is provided from. If I could change that, then if I had that power, then I think that is something that I would change. And probably also the rewards and incentive systems where currently we always focus on the final products or the polished products of the research process itself. We do not focus on the different stages of the research cycle or all the stages of the research cycle, starting from hypothesis to data collection to analysis and so on. The idea of the open science is to make all of these processes transparent and collaborative, open when possible and closed if necessary. So it would be easier if we can actually change the reward system whereby we can publish at different stages of the life cycle instead of just focusing on the final products of the life cycle of research itself. So if we could do that, then one would end up in a situation where you would have multiple artifacts which are contextless. And a platform like ORKG can actually bring all of that into context because ORKG uses metadata annotations. Even within the structured data, we use ontologies in order to make more comprehensible and accessible parts of the research in a form that can be easily described and can be understood and can be actionable by both humans and machines.
You mentioned it. It has to be transparent. And I love the phrase you mentioned, open when possible and closed when necessary or something.
Yeah.
That already perfectly sums it up. So nothing to add here.
Yeah, I mean, all you need is to structurally describe what you've done, irrespective of what the artifact is. Currently, we only allow published articles, but in the future, this might change as the open science movement is getting stronger and stronger. And if we get artifacts from different stages of the research lifecycle, then all a researcher needs to do is to use the right ontologies and structurally describe that particular research artifact. And ORKG could then act as an aggregator platform in order to provide rich context to all of these artifacts and then bring them together.
Yeah. I'm actually working on something like that right in this very moment, because you have to look through thousands of papers just to find those layered ontologies that somebody has once used and then discarded and thrown away, instead of just having something like Wikidata or eventually ORKG as an interface there. It is so amazing already today. I just create something and it auto suggests me, hey, I guess you mean this. You just did the how-to video from ORKG. Hey, I guess you mean this mass, which is already richly described in Wikipedia and Wikidata, and you don't need to do all of this again. You can just say, okay, I mean this planet, and you link it to the grant entity that is already out there.
Mhm.
So when I have heard all of this today, and when you sparked my curiosity to get involved into open science and also do my part because I want to help, what do I do? Where do I start today?
So as anyone who's new to the ORKG, one can actually go take a look into the ORKG because it's a free and open platform for everyone to interact with. And they could look into if data from their fields are represented in the ORKG. And if it is, then they could add more context to what is already present. If it's not present, then they could actually start structurally describing their own research articles or a couple of articles from their fields through a comparison. And that would provide them first-hand experience of using the ORKG and how to describe something in a semantically rich way rather than just a large text of document into a PDF. But yeah, out of that, what is the concise information that one needs to know? There could be multiple statements from a single research article, but then for that particular purpose, if they're trying to compare one research problem, then they could just extract that statement in a semantically correct form. And that is necessary for both the machines and humans to understand.
So summarizing this, I go to the ORKG, I look at what's there, and I add what I know. So basically, the first things, as with the beginning of Wikipedia, look at it, learn from it, add to it. That's it.
Exactly. I would say the same. But in addition, with the help of all of the colleagues in the ORKG, we have different videos for onboarding. So all of that will also help a new user who comes in contact with the ORKG.
Wonderful. So a lot of resources to familiarize yourself with it. And if you want, feel free to mention anything else when we've opened the box of open science.
It's just the open science movement that had got me here. In particular, why early career researchers need to be involved in the open science movement, because they look into the future of how research is done and the future of scholarly communication. We need to be cognizant that old ways, old models are not actually helping science move forward. And in particular, we can actually see that with climate change research, and we have also experienced that with the past pandemic. So when things were open and it was available, more progress could go on faster than it could usually in case of traditional closed science.
Closed science, past, open science, future.
It's the future. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Then thanks a lot for having you here. And
thank you very much.
I guess anyone has a chance to see you at any open science meetup eventually in the future. I know you've been at least 2 meetings, so eventually if you go to enough open science meetings in your region, maybe eventually Vinod will be standing in front of you. And if not, you have populated the open science community in your local region, so already you win.
Yeah, and then look forward also for new ORKG merch that I would bring for the next open science events.
ORKG merch? Ooh, wonderful. Yeah, I have already heard we have bookmarks and stickers, and
yes.
And we have those little flyers
too. Yes.
I only have one left. I mentioned they go up in price the more you share them.
Yeah.
So
now we have around 500 stickers.
Stickers. Yeah, okay.
So yeah.
So if you are an economist, feel free to come to the ORKG and add your economist knowledge both to the ORKG itself and as well to the ORKG sticker stock market.
Yeah.
All right. Again, thanks for having you here. Thanks for the interview. Thanks for the insights into the open science of ORKG. And thanks for your perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And bye bye.